I'm back at it on the next day, and I can't really get that far. First off, I knew that some of the C-clips or the circlips, maybe I've got one right here, had been damaged. You see how this side here is a little sticking up higher than the other side. Anyway, so I knew that if I start putting things back together, I'm going to need a couple of these clips. So I got online. This clip is like $10 for the OEM part. I managed to find a bag of them from a different supplier for like $5 or something like that. Anyway, so I've got some clips on the way. Also, the top shaft that was up here, at one point when I was trying to figure out how to do everything and get the bearings off the end of the shaft, I used a gear puller. I didn't use it, but I started to, and it was putting pressure on the bearing, the outside of the bearing. And I thought, you know what, I may have damaged this. It didn't like look or feel like I did, but I was worried that I did, so I've got another bearing on order. I was going to start from the bottom up anyway, and what I found was that, this is actually the top right here. Other people know all about this issue, but you've got a shaft and you got this bearing on here, and these bearings were hard to get off, right? Some of them harder than others in order to, get the whole shaft out of here. Well, they're even harder to get on, and it's not like I have a special tool that's going to go in here and press them on, and I have to put them on as they go in. So I've got these two shafts are in my freezer to cool them down, so the shaft shrinks a little bit, and then it's ready to go. When I'm ready to put things back together, I can take some of my bearings and put them on a hot plate or something like that and heat them up a little bit. I think that'll be easier. Some people use like a torch or something, but I think it's just better to get an even heat and a lesser intensity heat, just putting on a hot plate or in a pan. Anyway, I'll heat my bearings up, I'll warm them up, I'll get my shafts out of the freezer, and then I can bring the shaft in cold with my bearing. I'm forgetting which way I gotta go, but anyway, so that's what's going on with the shafts and the bearing and all that stuff. But my other big deal, and the reason why I started filming, was that having bought this used part, and who knows how long it sat in a warehouse or something, and then it's been sitting here in my garage, and all the inside of where the bearings sit was getting kind of rusty. I mean, you can see a little bit of discoloration, and this phone constantly focuses in the wrong spot. A little bit of discoloration, kind of looks like some pitting, and so it just wasn't smooth. I mean, there basically was kind of a little bit of a rust layer in here, and so I came in. I had already come through with a wire wheel, this one and this smaller one. The bigger wire wheel could fit through here. The smaller ones I was having to go in through here, and that was really tricky. And one thing I noticed about wire wheels, and I've noticed this in the past, is that they get away the loose debris, but the stuff that's really stuck on here, the wire wheel tends to polish it, and it doesn't really take it away. So anyway, I used the wire wheel first, and then I came in with some 600 grit carbide paper, sandpaper. So just little pieces got in here and worked. And then if I saw a little spot that just was more stubborn, then I'd work it this way on that one little spot and then keep coming around in a circle. So I was able to get all these cleaned out. You see they look pretty good. They look pretty clean. I did a check, and it feels like bearings are going in. They're not supposed to go loose, but they're not supposed to be like so tight that you can't even get it done either. So especially like, my pinion gear, that's got 2 bearings, and they go down in that middle hole back there. And so I started to try to slide the pinion in from here, or the bevel gear, and it was going in. I was able to get it in. I was having to kind of like shake it as I went and get it. It was such a perfect fit. So anyway, that's what I had to do. Clean these out, because I knew there was no way I was going to get all this put back together. So it's clean, and then I've got the 2 lower shafts in the freezer, and then when they're cold enough, I can start trying to put it back together. And there's a couple spots where, like on the end of a shaft where I need a clip, I can put those clips on later. So I should mostly be able to get everything back in here, and then when my good clips arrive, you know, I can put the clips back on and do all that. Super excited. Things are moving along because of the using the freezer to cool the shaft down, using my oven to heat up the bearing that was in there. So right now, because let's see here, the shaft is cold and the bearings are on the shaft, so the bearings are cold, so everything's kind of going in and out of here real easy. So let me show you what I did. That bearing right there, that one was in a pan in the oven. I heated it up to 175 degrees. The whole shaft was in my freezer for 2 hours. I brought the shaft in here. I brought the pan in here. Had that bearing sitting in there. And this bearing I had never even taken off. There was no need. So I slid this in here halfway. Then I was able to slide. What did I have to do? I had to do, sorry for the focus. I had to do the roller bearings, and then these gears, they're one solid piece. Then there's a washer. And then I went and grabbed the warm bearing expecting a bunch of problem, and it just slipped right on the shaft like nothing. I mean, it just right on. And again, like I said, now things have cooled down. The bearings cooled down. So I am able to just get it up in here. So got that. And then I had one brand new clip, C-clip. Let's see, can I? There you go. You can see I've got that clip on. So kind of good to go right now. What I want to do is, right now, while this is able to move, while this is able to slide back and forth, because again, this bearing's really cold, I want to kind of get it positioned in the right spot. And there's a clip that goes on here, but there's a plate or a holder. There's something that holds this bearing from, it keeps everything from wanting to go this way. So I got to find that part laying here somewhere and get that bolted on, I believe. I just want to make sure, sorry, I keep moving the camera off. I just want to make sure that this is positioned where it needs to be, and I don't have to tap it or try to move the bearings around at all. And then, even though I'm waiting on some clips to arrive in the mail, I can move on to, you know, the bevel gear or the pinion, get that up in here too. So I'm going to move along and do what I can. So I've got the bevel gear in, and this one was a little trickier because of that snap ring. Let's see if I can get this flashlight in a good spot. Yeah, there's the snap ring that's down right there. There you go. Or the C-clip or circlip. And so it would have been good to show this, but basically it was the bevel gear still had the two bearings on it. I got it, the shaft slid in and put this gear on, slid it over. Then I had to just put the circlip on the tip of the shaft, like basically just kind of like right around this part of the shaft. And the shaft was still back far enough, that's why I could only get the circlip on the tip of it, so that I could put this on. And then once these are all in here, I backed the bevel gear out until like the shaft was kind of in about this far, with this gear just hanging on the tip of it. But I was able to get to the circlip then, and I was able to get the circlip on and then use this gear to kind of push it most of the rest of the way and then sort of slide it and get it to clip into place, if that makes sense. So it's shaft in, put this gear on, shaft in a little more, get the circlip on, get these gears on, then move these gears and the shaft, everything comes over this direction pretty far. Then slide this as far as it would go, get the C-clip on as far as I could, push the C-clip with this, put this back, tap that into place. Anyway, all that. So not too bad. I mean, had I done it before, it would have been easier this time. And I don't have the right clip pliers. I would really suggest that you got to have the pliers that when you squeeze, it actually spreads the clip apart. That would help immensely. And longer pliers right in here would be better. And then this, there's this piece. I can back this out a little bit. Let's see here. I can't right now. We've seen this before. We've got this piece. The bearings sit down inside, but on the shaft. Now, had I done everything quicker and the shaft was still colder, I think my bearings would have gone on a lot easier. But by the time I got to this, my shaft was already warming up, so my bearings wouldn't go on good. So I put the first bearing and use this socket to tap it in. You don't want to put, pressure on this outer race. And then get it as far as I could. Now the shaft won't go anywhere because that clip is on it. It just can't go through. So I was able to, tap the first bearing in as far as it would go, then put the second bearing and tap it in. And then, I could hear when it was getting really clanging and bottoming out in this piece. And then if I look down in, move these over. If I look down in there, I can see that the bearing is down and pressed right against the lip of this sleeve here. And that's it. I'm not going to go any further with this because this, I can kind of tap everything back this way. And there's shims that go in behind here. Or are they in between here? Actually, the shims might be right in between here and a plate to get this other plate deal. I can't quite remember. I'll have to look at my diagram and my videos from previously. But anyway, so I'm not going to go any further. And then the next one the next thing I have to do is put the fork. The fork right down in there. This fork right here can go in between the gears, slip down into place, and then run that shaft through, making sure that I've got the little bearing that goes down inside here. And that's got a little spring. I got to make sure that there's the little spring down in there too, which there is. Okay, you can see that I have the shift fork in there, which is easy enough. You just slip it in, get into position, started to push this shaft through. You can see a little rust on the shaft because, like other things in here, there was rust in there, so the shaft wouldn't go easy. I had to get some sandpaper in there and clean it out, and the oil's kind of flushing it a little bit as I go. But anyway, now you see this little block of wood there. So first off, I slid the gears and the fork over to butt up against this block. And before the shaft would go and just hit the ball, what I'm going to be doing, if I find it, is I'm taking a punch and I'm going to press the ball down and keep the punch against this side of the hole. Push the ball down and then push the shaft in. Can't do it with while I'm filming. I need two hands, but again, just push the ball and the spring down in there. You can see it's a little springy. Push it down and probably give a little tap on the shaft here on the end to pop over the ball. And then I can slide things back, take the wood out, and just go the rest of the way. This shaft ended up giving me a lot more trouble than it should have. It should have been easy to just, tap it through, get it in there, watch it come out the back there. So for myself, for the future, for anybody else that runs into, they're doing this kind of work, I already could see that this hole was a little rusty. And so I rolled up some 600 grit paper and I really worked it and spun it and, you know, rubbed back and forth until I wasn't seeing rust anymore and it was basically metal. So no problem, I was able to get in there. But the hole back here, you know, down there, that one down in there, that one you can't get to as easy, and I couldn't even see into it as easily. But, you know, kind of like this right here, you see this rusty buildup right there. And yeah, look at that stuff. So I'm gonna have to clean that out too. And so, you know, that was going on in that hole also. So I go to tap this shaft through and it won't go. Now, I had already did some sandpaper work. It just wasn't as good of a job. And then I had to do it. I couldn't get the shaft pounded through. It was too tight. And then I did some more sand work and I could get the shaft through, but I couldn't turn this. And so I was like, whatever, I can't turn it, but I can put this in the right direction so that this little bolt here with a pin on it, it goes through that shaft and it keeps the shaft from spinning or going back and forth. So just a refresher here. See, it's got a smooth shank on there, but the threads, and it goes through right down there. You can in fact, you can see where it's going through. You'll probably, there you go, you see the end poking out right there. Okay, so that's got to line up really well. If the hole doesn't line up with this just perfect, then this is going to be tight to go in. There's a little bit of play, but then I realized also, okay, so I was having trouble getting this in. So I got this pounded out and I rigged this up. I had one of these to do like make a 90-degree bend on something. I've also got this flexible deal here in my drill, and I've got a bit in here, and I wrapped some tape around the bit first. Let's see, this direction. Then I put tape on the sandpaper for a good length while I was rolling the sandpaper around, and then no more tape, it's just sandpaper, okay? And you got to make sure it's going the right way. If you're going to spin your drill, you know, whoa, that direction, and then the sandpaper and the tape has to be going the opposite. So I rigged this up so that I could, you know, come in through the top up here and get that in there and work that back and forth. Of course, I was holding drill up here, or you can use this one, but I found that this was kind of hitting up here, and I wasn't able to really move around in the hole so well. So I was able to really grind that hole out, and then that made it so you can see here, if you look at the pin, oh sorry, let me back this out. Back that out a little. There, see, just even with a light press of my finger, it's perfect, nice and smooth. Of course, I always flushed it with some WD-40, and then I put oil on the shaft when I put the shaft in, all that good stuff. Well, then I still ran into a problem where this was super tight, and it was these threads. Halfway back down in there, it was just a bunch of rust and gunk. I could not get this bolt in. I knew it was going to snap, and so I got my thread cutter out, and I got the shaft completely out of the way, ran the thread cutter in there, whatever, it's like you know, one of these deals, but the correct size. And now, after cutting the threads, oops, there we go, I can get it in by hand. So I couldn't even get that in with a wrench. I knew I was going to snap the bolt, or it was going to be stuck forever. And now I can just do it by hand. So that's the difference it makes. Okay, wanted to record where I'm at right now. This shaft is up here, all in place, ready to go. And a couple things to point out. First off, when I took it apart, I thought I really needed to have this ring off of here. I was kind of trying to figure it out. I should have just been reading the service manual. But anyway, I had taken this ring off and set it to the side. Later, when I was putting everything back together, I had this bearing in here. And in the parts diagram, this ring is not shown. It's not listed as a part you can buy. You can kind of tell that the bearing has this flange to it in the drawing, but they don't show this ring as a separate piece or anything like that. So I had it all together, and the diagram doesn't show that clip, but then I saw the clip sitting on the table, and of course I could see like, oh, well, it definitely goes in this bearing, and the bearing has a groove, so I also wondered like, wait a second, there's a groove on this bearing, where's my clip? I found it, and right size. Okay, so just so you know, the ring is not shown in the parts diagram as a separate piece. Make sure you've got that ring in the bearing. It keeps this bearing from going that direction. This retainer keeps the bearing from going this direction. The shaft already can't go this way because these teeth right here, they're part of the shaft. They're milled right into the shaft. So I've got that set. That's what's going on there. And then in order for me to get the shaft in, fortunately I had some help. A friend, Eric, was here, and I actually did need another pair of hands. I put this shaft in the freezer. I put the bearing in the oven. And I found that on this case, right down in here, there was a little lip. So I couldn't get the bearing in this direction. But is that how, did I have to do that? Yes. You can't, if you have your pinion gear shaft in, and all these gears down there in place, the gear that's down there, I know you can't see it, it's dark, but the gear that's down there comes up past the hole for this bearing. And so you cannot put this bearing in this direction. Like, you can't put the bearing on the shaft and then slide in this way if those are in. Now, if you did it in a way where that's sort of down and out and whatever, and you get this inverse and then somehow you bring that up, I'm not sure you can do that. But anyway, I got this in, put this gear on, put this sleeve on, or collar, and then put the whole thing up in place where it needs to be. Then I tried to start putting the bearing on. It still was really tight, so how I did it with help was a piece of wood. So I had a piece of wood in there, wedged against the back, and wedged right up against the bearing. In fact, you can see, some of the wood is smashed right there. Now, the piece was longer when I first started. Okay, so the bearing was right up against this. And then I took a large, this is a small one, but I had a large one, and smacked this shaft. I started with this one, then I went to a large one, just so I didn't break this one. But anyway, it's a plastic dead blow hammer. It doesn't bounce. It's not going to damage the steel at all. And really swung and smacked it really hard. Once the bearing was on and flush with the shaft, you can't keep hitting. You're just basically, the shaft was hitting the wood. So then a socket, or a piece of pipe. But anyway, so then I had the socket on there, and the socket was against the wood, and I had to cut my piece of wood to be, just perfect to get kind of a nice fit. And because I didn't have this ring on, the shaft was able to go a little further in than normal. So if there was any slack as the bearing was getting pressed on, if it was creating any slack, it's okay. We kept pressure on the shaft pushing that way against the piece of wood and the socket, and then kept hitting again until it was all the way through. Okay, so you can wedge it, you can use a socket, you'll be able to get that bearing on. But I did have my shaft in the freezer, and I did warm up my bearing. And the trouble I had with, there was a lip that was down in here, a little lip, so the bearing didn't want to go in. I ground that lip away. It wasn't supposed to be there. I'm not even sure how it's possible, because they mill this out. As you can see right here, they mill it all the way through. But there was a ledge. And I took care of that with basically this, like a Dremel with some sort of sanding disc, or I had a little one of these, to do some finer work, and just got it off there real quick. So if you have a problem like that, maybe you got to do the same thing in a little Dremel and sander, cylinder type thing will do the trick. So that's it. That's in. And if you did it the way I did, then after it's in, then you got to get the bearing in the right position, put your clip on, get your retainer on, and I'm good to go. At this stage, I didn't want to go much further unless I double, triple check that all the parts, everything's correct. I'm not going to go over this. I mean, that's kind of when you're working on it, it's fairly easy to figure out how to get it in there. I did put a new O-ring in here. I did have to clean this hole out, and it's a bit loose, but it'll go easy, so that's great. While checking, making sure I wasn't missing anything, I did realize I would have caught it eventually. I mean, this is the reason why I was doing this, but I needed the clip that's right here, so I put that one on. And I stumbled across, I had this collar right here sitting on the table, and man, I searched and searched. This collar is not in the parts diagram. All my parts that were sitting out were from this, and so I checked everything, and this collar's not there. There's a collar right here. It's a different color, or it's just because it's so clean, but it is different. I've got that collar in place. So here's this collar. It's not in the parts diagram, but I noticed, this part of the shaft or the PTO is sticking out so long. And there's a coupler that goes on here, between here and the mid case of the tractor. I started looking at the wear patterns on here and trying to see if I could find a clue, and I found two, and that helped me figure out what was going on with this collar. Right there, see inside? See the spline marks? Okay, like a little bit of rusty contact point of splines. It matches up with these splines, and you'll notice the splines don't really go all the way. So on the inside here, you see it's kind of a ring of more polished or cleaner surface, and you don't see a bunch of lines going all the way. There's kind of like a line right there, but what that looks to me like when I slid it off, it's streaked and kind of made one line. Another thing I found, right, if you look on the surface, I'm going to set this down and show you. Let me set it there. I'll show you right here. Notice this mark right there and that mark right there. Okay, look at that. That's the part of a ring, a retaining clip, a C-clip. So just to double check, I went and grabbed a clip and I set it on. See how that shape and the curve in there matches up? So I could tell that there was a clip. Now the clip, when they're on, they're expanded. So that's why that one is off from there. The clip would have been open more. So you can tell that there had been a clip against this side of the collar, which is the same side as internally. Oops. So, man, it was like, okay, that is definitely what goes there. And another thing, a coupler goes on here, and if by accident the coupler slid too far, it just can't, it would get wedged where there's no more splines. It's smooth back there. You would have to have, this collar to take up some space. So at this point, I'm, 90% sure this collar goes right here, and then the collar will go on here, and the collar probably is exactly, that long, like twice the distance of this, which makes sense, and that's kind of how it appears in the drawing. But in the parts diagram, this collar is not there. Okay, so keep that in mind, and we'll double check later. Like I'll check my videos, and before I put this back on the tractor and bolt it back through the mid case and all that, make sure that that's correct.